Unit 2, Lesson 14, Structure. Let's learn how to express our preferences. And then we can use some structures in English, all right? You can use the expression would rather. We could use the word prefer, or we could use would prefer. So we have three situations to talk about our preferences in English, okay? Let's go slowly. Prefer is used to talk about general preferences. General preferences. I prefer rock to opera. She prefers traveling by plane to driving her car. When we use the verb prefer, we prefer something to, so we prefer something to another thing. Prefer Coke to Fanta. Prefer soccer to volleyball. All right? Beautiful. If you use verb, the verb has to come with the ing form. Ing. Okay, I prefer rock to opera. No ing because rock is not a verb. Opera is not a verb. But she prefers traveling. Travel is a verb. She prefers traveling by plane to driving her car. So, prefer something to another thing and prefer verb ing to verb ing. Okay? Prefer, we have to use to. And if it's a verb, ing and ing. All right? That's the only thing, the two things you need to know about prefer. Okay? It's very similar to Portuguese. All right? Would rather. Okay, would rather or would prefer are used in specific situations. Prefer, general experiences. Would rather, would prefer in specific situations. To talk about the preferences in the present or in the future. Come here, pay attention. I would rather read a book than watch a movie, okay? Would rather something than another thing. Prefer something to another thing. Would rather something than another thing, okay? I would rather read a book than watch a movie. All right? And if I use would prefer, we have to use rather than. So, would prefer something rather than another thing. She would prefer to stay home tonight rather than go out. Okay, rather than. Let me make it capital here. Rather than. Okay, she would prefer something rather than another thing. All right? Beautiful. Get out. Okay. And you can also instead rather than or would prefer, you can also use here rather than or instead of, okay? I can say here, she would prefer to stay home tonight instead of, but of is a preposition. Then in this case, the go has to be in the ing, the gerund, instead of going. Okay? If I use instead of, this verb here has to be in the ing form because it's the preposition rule. Do you remember the preposition rule? Every verb after a preposition must come in the gerund form. Again, every verb after a preposition must come in the gerund form. Okay? After after finishing the job, you can have fun. Okay? Before spending money, we have to work hard. Okay? You don't know what I'm capable of doing. Don't mess with me. Okay? I'm angry. You don't know what I'm capable of doing. Preposition, verb with ing. Preposition before the preposition, verb with ing. Preposition after, verb with ing. Every verb after a preposition must come. Let me make this capital. Every. Exception. Preposition to. Okay, because it makes the verb infinitive. To cook, cozinhar. Okay. Beautiful. So let's remember here. Let's not lose focus. Prefer something to another thing. Okay? Prefer something to. Would rather than something than another thing. And would prefer rather than. Would prefer something rather than another thing. Or instead of. Okay? Then we have the contractions. I would rather, I'd rather, I'd rather, I'd rather, I'd rather, I'd rather. It's like we are almost canceling this D here. Almost. I'd rather, you'd rather, he'd rather, she'd rather, it'd rather, we'd rather, we'd rather, you'd rather, and they'd rather. So this D is soft. They'd rather. They'd rather. Okay? Beautiful. So far, so good. Let's move forward. Let's keep pushing. All right? Let's keep pushing. Other uses for would rather. Situations now. Remember, now, happening now, temporary. Would rather be plus verb plus ing. I'd rather be traveling to Hawaii than be working here now. So when you use the word now, okay, we use verb to be and the ing. I would rather be dancing salsa. I don't know if it's how you dance salsa. I would rather be dancing salsa now than be recording this class here. I'm joking, okay? I would rather be here recording the class. All right? So situations now, would rather plus be, verb and ing, okay? She'd rather be hanging out with her friends than be fighting with her boyfriend now. Okay? I suppose so. Situations in the past. Would rather plus have plus participle. She would rather have traveled more around the world than have gotten married too early. She would rather have traveled more around the world than have gotten married. All right? And when we want another person to do something for us, we use the past form. We are not talking about the past. That's the situations in the past. Here we want another person to do something, we use the past form. That's it. Would you rather? Would you rather? I loved you more, okay? This love here has to be in the past form because you would rather me to do something. So would you rather I loved you more, okay? Or the opposite, I'd rather you didn't talk to me like that. Okay? I'd rather you didn't talk to me like that. I'm not talking about the past. I just want you to do something. Or negative. I would rather you didn't talk to me like that. Okay? For example, my friend owes me money. I'd rather Pablo paid me soon. I'd rather Pablo paid me soon. Maybe tomorrow, okay? Maybe in 2 weeks. Talking about the future, right? But we use the structure of the past form. All right? So far, so good? Excellent. Let's continue. Tip. Rather than means instead of, like we saw here, rather than, instead of, okay? And can be used in combination with would prefer to. Would prefer to, okay? Would prefer to. I can use with rather than or with instead of, okay? Example, I would prefer to go back to the topic of the meeting rather than lose precious time. I would prefer to drive for 3 hours and take a quick break. Instead of driving, of preposition, I have to use ing. Instead of driving for 6 hours straight. So I would prefer to drive for 3 hours, take a quick break, instead of driving for 6 hours straight. Straight, non-stop. All right? Beautiful? Excellent. So in a nutshell, okay, to sum up, to summarize, okay? In a nutshell, S is British English, okay? Summarize with Z, summarize is American, okay? Yeah, so prefer, verb with ing, okay? Prefer, verb with ing. She prefers, wow, it's very confused here. Oh, no, sorry. Let's summarize here. Let's just clean this book here. Okay? So, prefer, verb with ing. She prefers traveling by plane to driving her car. Okay? When I use prefer, I have to use to. And if it's a verb, with ing. Okay? Would prefer to. Would prefer to, I have to use with rather than or instead of. If I use instead of, and there is a verb after, this verb must be in the ing form. Okay, that's the preposition rule. And would rather plus verb, and I have to use would rather than. Prefer to. Would prefer rather than or instead of. Would rather something than. All right? 3 forms to express our preferences. Now you're going to do some exercises to practice, okay? You're going to do exercise letter A. You're going to complete the sentences with the words here, okay? And then you're going to complete the exercise letter B, all right? After that, we are going to correct these exercises together. So press pause now and do these 2 exercises. And after we are going to correct them together. Have fun. Outstanding! Let's correct the exercises together. Let's do it. Number 1. Would you rather I? Would you rather I? You rather I. So you want me to do something. I have to use the past form, okay? We want another person do something. Past form, okay? So would you rather I, verb to be. Would you rather I were famous? Would you rather I were famous? Okay, like the conditional, when you talk about hypothetical situations, we can use was or we can use were. Would you rather I was famous? Number 2, I don't want to go out tonight. I'd rather stay home. Okay, I'd rather stay home. I don't want to go out tonight. I'd rather stay home. I prefer to stay home. Okay? 3, they like going for a hike, but I prefer on a sandy beach. So they like going for a hike, but I prefer lying on a sandy beach. Lying. Lie, mentir, or deitar. In this case, on a sandy beach, deitar. Lying, okay? I prefer lying. When I use verb after prefer, this verb needs to be in the ing form, okay? Verbs after prefer, okay? ing form. Number 4. I'd rather travel at night. I'd rather travel at night. During the day. Then I'd rather travel at night than during the day. Okay? 5. I'd rather be coming with you than be here by myself. Okay? Then be here by myself. 6. He prefers traveling by train to traveling by plane. Okay, he prefers traveling by train to traveling, ing, traveling, because it's prefer. When you use a verb after prefer, ing. 7. I usually have coffee, but today I would prefer to have, okay, I would prefer to have tea, right? Would prefer to have tea. 8. I'd prefer to read for a while rather than watch TV. All right? 9. I'd rather you, okay? No, we made a mistake here. Huh? I'd rather you stayed. Why did I mark to stay here? Oh, sorry. Number 7 is have. I marked wrong here. Number 7 is have, okay? And number 8, watch. Okay. Number 9, I'd rather you stayed. I'd rather you stayed here with me and the kids, okay? Not playing football with your friends. I would rather you stayed here, okay? I want you. I'd rather you, all right? And number 10, he would prefer to stay in a hotel, all right? Than in an Airbnb, maybe, all right? Excellent. Now letter B. Let's complete the sentences appropriately. Let's see. I would prefer to watch a movie, okay? I would prefer to watch a movie rather than, okay? Because when I use would prefer, I have two options, okay? I would prefer to, I can use rather than or instead of. But if I use instead of, the verb has to be in the ing form, okay? In this case, go is not in the ing, so I would prefer to watch a movie rather than go to a concert, okay? Number 2, anyone would prefer to keep their job. Now, getting with ing. So, instead of getting fired. Of course, anyone would prefer to keep their job instead of getting fired. 3. I'd rather had a salad last night. I would rather have had a salad last night. Talking about yesterday, in the past. I would rather have had a salad last night. All right? 4. I'd prefer to talk. I'd prefer to walk rather than talk with some stranger. Okay? 5. I become a painter. I would rather, okay, become a painter. 6. To go on a cruise. So I would prefer, because when I use I would prefer, I have to use to. Would prefer to. Would rather, no to. Okay? I would prefer to go on a cruise. Number 7, I having a job to being unemployed. Okay, so I having a job to be, I prefer, okay, I prefer having a job to being, because when I use prefer, I have to use to. And when you use prefer, I have to use the verb with ing. Okay? 8. She'd prefer to work night shift. Okay? She would prefer to work night shift. Work at the weekends. She would prefer to. The verb here, no ing. Rather than. All right? Number 9. I'd rather she something different. I'd rather she, another person, I'd rather she did something different. Okay? I'd rather she did something different. And number 10, he didn't do it on his own. I would rather, he didn't do it on his own. I would rather he, okay? I want him to do something. I would rather he didn't do it on his own. All right? Is it clear? If you have questions, you can send us an email, no problem. But you can also watch this lesson as many times as you need. Repeat, read the book carefully to understand the differences between these three ways of expressing preferences. Prefer to, okay? And if it comes a verb, the verb with ing. Then you have would rather. Okay, when you use would rather is would rather than. Okay, and would prefer to. Okay, and would prefer to, and you can use rather than or instead of. If it's instead of, the verb in the ing form. All right? See you in the next lesson. Goodbye.